Anning used every last bit of her strength to escape to the rooftop, hiding herself in a corner. But soon the group of thugs kicked the door open. The leader, a guy with red hair, had a sickening grin on his face, and his laughter was piercing in the quiet night. Wenu has been gone for months. If you could mess around with him, what's wrong with being my girlfriend? In a panic, she felt a steel pipe, her only hope at that moment. The name Wenu made a wave of disgust wash over her again. If it weren't for him, she wouldn't be tangled up with these people. The thugs' voices were getting closer, and Anning's breath came in ragged shivers. Mustering courage from somewhere, she suddenly swung the pipe and smashed it against the redhead's head. With a dull thud, the redhead's scream cut through the night. Anning tried to run past him, but his buddies had already heard the commotion. A heavy-set guy tackled her to the ground. As she struggled, Anning's hand found a brick, and she swung it backward, cracking it over his head. He cried out in pain and let go. Anning tried to escape, but she was completely surrounded. "Please, let me go." Anning's voice was choked with tears, her eyes pleading. But her pleas were met with only the thugs' cruel laughter and advancing footsteps. Anning backed away, took a wrong step, and fell into the darkness. She felt the long, endless terror that comes before death. The wind howled in her ears and tears blurred her vision. She didn't want to die like this, but she was powerless. Anning fell to her death, and the police came to collect her body. The strange thing was, she didn't really die. She had become a spirit. Before she could figure out what was happening, so-called witnesses appeared out of nowhere, all claiming that Anning worked at an adult entertainment club. They said she'd had a financial dispute with a client and jumped from the pressure. In the end, the case was ruled a suicide, and the truth of what happened to her was buried. Not long after Anning's fall, a blood-curdling scream came from the rooftop. Anning's spirit was instantly transported back up. In the dark of night, she saw a young man with a steel pipe, beating the thugs until they were bloody and battered. When the young man looked up, Anning froze. Wenu, hadn't he been gone for months? Why was he here? Wenu grabbed the redhead by the collar and dragged him toward the edge of the roof like he was nothing. The redhead's face was pale with terror, his voice trembling as he begged, "Let me go, please, I'm begging you." Wenu's lips curled into a cold smile that held no warmth. "She begged you too, didn't she? Did you let her go?" Hearing this, the redhead nearly wet his pants. You're murdering me!" Wenu scoffed and took off his hat. The moonlight fell on his face, revealing a look of grim determination. A blood debt must be paid in blood, don't you think? And Wenu had personally thrown the culprit off the rooftop to avenge her. Only then did Anning realize she had misunderstood him. But because of what he did, Wenu was charged with intentional homicide and sentenced to death by firing squad. On the day of his execution, he showed no fear because he was finally going to see the girl he loved most. Bang! A bullet pierced his heart, ending his short life. Anning's spirit hugged him as tears streamed down her face. "If there's a next life, you and I... let's not end up like this again." Anning thought her spirit was about to fade away. But when she opened her eyes, she was back at the beginning of her freshman year of college. After the initial shock, she thanked the heavens for giving her a second chance. This time, she would not repeat her mistakes. To do that, she decided she had to stay away from Wenu from the very beginning. Just as she was thinking this, Anning turned her head and saw a familiar face right next to her. She let out a terrified shriek. "You've got to be kidding me! Wenu! What is he doing here?" Her scream woke him up. He slowly sat up straight. He was still just as handsome, but he gave off an unapproachable, cold aura that made people both scared and unable to look away. Wenu noticed her intense stare and turned to look at her. Anning instinctively shot her textbook up to hide her burning face. When it was almost 11, Anning suddenly remembered something important. Without a second thought, she grabbed her backpack, ducked down, carefully opened the back door of the classroom, and slipped out like a little thief. Wenu sat at his desk, quietly watching her practiced moves. The corner of his mouth lifted into a faint, unreadable smile. Anning weaved through the different food windows, quickly ordering and packing meals, then went floor by floor to deliver them to her customers. She was drenched in sweat, but she had earned enough to cover her food for the week. By the time Anning got back to the cafeteria, the lunch rush was over. As usual, she ordered a portion of spinach and eggs for herself, no rice. The woman serving the food looked at the bone-thin girl in front of her with pity. "You young people shouldn't always be thinking about dieting," she said, piling a huge serving of spinach and eggs onto her tray. Anning wasn't dieting, she was saving money. The free porridge offered by the cafeteria was a staple of every meal for her. Just then, the quiet cafeteria suddenly erupted with excitement. Wenu had arrived. His stunning good looks instantly captured the attention of every girl there. Wenu, however, only had eyes for Anning. The cool, detached air about her drew him in. A small smile played on his lips as he quietly nudged his buddy next to him to throw a paper wad into the porridge container. The next second, a used napkin splatted right into the porridge. Anning's eyes went wide as a thought flashed through her mind. It's happening again. It's really happening. In her last life, Wenyu's pestering all started with this pot of porridge. Sure enough, a teasing voice came from behind her. Oops, sorry, my hand slipped. Anning didn't turn around. She calmly reached in, picked the napkin out of the porridge, and tossed it into a nearby trash can. Wenyu watched, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. Then he saw Anning ladle a full bowl of the porridge, and turned to walk toward her seat. But Wenyu wasn't going to let it go. He quickly walked up and grabbed her arm. Hey, you can't drink that. Anning's heart skipped a beat as memories of her past life came flooding back. She looked up and met Wenyu's bright eyes. It's dirty. Don't drink it. I had someone get you a new meal. Having lived through the nightmare of her past life, Anning had a feeling that if she let him draw her in, she would fall into that dark abyss all over again. She suddenly lifted the bowl and began chugging the porridge down in big gulps. Wenyu was completely stunned, staring wide-eyed as she drank the entire bowl in one go. Then Anning slammed the metal bowl down on the table with a loud clatter. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, looked at the dumbfounded Wenyu, and said coldly, "Wasting food is a bad thing." With that, she walked right past him without a second glance. Wenyu stood there, speechless, and watched her leave the cafeteria. After a long moment, he couldn't help but let out a chuckle. This girl was something else. Wenyu watched Ji Anning's retreating figure and rubbed his forehead with a wry smile. He thought he'd be able to get her number, but he didn't even learn her name. His green-haired friend suddenly perked up. Bro, I know this one. She's that student on financial aid who was on the news this year for bringing her grandma to school with her. As he spoke, his eyes lit up, and he started gushing about Anning. She's 100 times prettier in person than on TV. Wenyu unceremoniously gave him a kick. Find the news story. A mother who died young, a father who disappeared, and a sick grandmother. Ji Anning's life was full of hardship. Perhaps because of this, she had a resilience that other girls didn't. Wenyu was drawn to her, maybe not just for her beauty, but for that unique spirit she had. Just then, the green-haired friend piped up at the worst possible moment. Man, she has a really tiny waist! Wenyu's face instantly darkened. He snatched the phone from his friend and turned off the screen. His eyes seemed to say, "Look at my girl again and I'll blind you." In the blink of an eye, it was the end of the school day. Anning finished her dinner deliveries early so she could get home to her grandma before dark. But as she walked out of the school gate, she caught a glimpse of a black car in her peripheral vision. Wenyu was waiting inside. She remembered getting into his car in her past life, and how that had been the start of her descent into a living hell. So until she could figure things out, it was best to stay away from him. Anning immediately turned her head, pretending not to see. Honk! A sharp horn blast pierced the evening air. Anning kept her head down and quickened her pace. She heard a car window rolling down behind her, and a man's smiling voice carried on the wind. But she ran like a frightened deer toward the bus stop. She never imagined, however, that the wheels of fate were already turning in the shadows. Suddenly, she felt a disgusting touch on her rear, and the blood in her veins froze instantly. The memories flooded back, the same bus, the same groper. Was she destined to repeat the same events even in a new life? The man, certain Anning was an easy target, shamelessly reached for her. Anning, having had enough, quickly pulled out a pen and stabbed his hand. In an instant, the man's howl nearly blew the roof off the bus. Everyone turned at the sound. The man in glasses was clutching his injured hand, cursing and demanding that the girl pay his medical bills. Anning calmly accused him of groping her and said she was acting in self-defense. The man immediately played innocent, denying the accusation. A woman in a red coat nearby started blaming Anning, without even knowing the facts, accusing her of being indecent. Anning shot back without hesitation. By that logic, since you look like a pig, should we put you on a chopping block and sell you by the pound? The woman was stunned into silence. Anning was determined to teach the pervert a lesson today. She first said they should call the police and check the security footage. The man in glasses instantly got nervous. The moment the bus stopped, he stumbled off and tried to run. Anning wasn't going to let him get away with it. Reborn, she refused to endure this in silence again. "Hey, stop!" Anning yelled, chasing him off the bus. Just then, Wenu saw Anning hurry off the bus. He honked his horn. Anning instinctively looked back and saw Wenu in his car, staring daggers at her. The moment Wenu got out of his car, Anning darted back onto the bus. Frustrated, Wenu stopped a woman who was getting off the bus and asked what happened. When he learned that the man had groped Anning, Wenu's face turned grim, a cold, murderous glint in his eyes. He didn't want to wait another second. He drove his car and cut the man off. Walking up to him, Wenu shoved him hard. Without giving him a chance to breathe, he asked menacingly, "What did you do on the bus just now?" The man snapped back impatiently, "None of your business." Wenu let out a cold laugh and threw a heavy punch right into the man's face, knocking a front tooth out. Then he grabbed the man by his hair and warned him to keep his hands to himself, or he'd get a beating every time Wenu saw him. The man cried and swore he'd never do it again, and only then did Wenu let him go in disgust. Back in the car, Wenu looked at the photo of Jianning on his phone, his feelings a complicated mix. He guessed she had been deliberately avoiding him, but he didn't know why. This beautiful girl who didn't care about her image was becoming more and more interesting to him. Meanwhile, Anning unlocked a heavy-duty lock on a door. In the dim room, her grandmother was staring blankly at the TV. Seeing Anning, she lit up like a child. Her grandmother had Alzheimer's, so for her safety, Anning had to lock her in the house during the day. She would only take her out for a walk in the evening when she got home. Looking up at the starry sky, Anning couldn't help but voice her thoughts. "There's this person. I used to hate him, and now I don't, but I'm still scared of him." "Don't be scared, don't be scared. Grandma's here," her grandmother said. Even though her memory was failing, her love for Anning remained strong. A wave of warmth spread through Anning's heart, but she really didn't know what to do about Wenu. Once she fell for him, she knew she'd never be able to pull away. The next day at noon, Anning, as usual, finished her deliveries and headed straight for the cafeteria. Business was good today, so she decided to treat herself to some sweet and sour potato strips. Suddenly, a voice as sweet and dangerous as honey sounded behind her. "Ma'am, that's okay. She won't be eating here today." Anning looked up and saw Wenu standing right beside her. Although Anning no longer felt the same aversion to Wenu's presence, she couldn't help but feel nervous when she looked him directly in the eyes. Anning looked away and asked cautiously, "Do you need something?" Wenu was completely captivated by how different Anning was. She wasn't conceited like other pretty girls, and seemed completely unaware of her own beauty. Wenu's lips curved into a slight smile. "Gee, Anning, right? My name is Wenu. I'm a junior. I wanted to apologize for the porridge incident the other day and treat you to a meal to make up for it. No time like the present." After the bus incident, Anning knew she couldn't avoid what was meant to be, so she gave a small nod. Wenu was surprised she agreed so readily, especially since she'd been avoiding him just days before. He started rattling off a list of nice restaurants nearby, but Anning cut him off. "I want to get KFC." Wenu was floored. Once again, she wasn't following the script. Don't all pretty girls like Japanese food or steak? 10 minutes later, they were at the KFC near campus. Wenu took one bite of a chicken wing and thought it was too greasy. He was wondering what kind of person actually liked this stuff. When he saw Anning eating with relish, even shamelessly sucking the sauce off her fingers right in front of him, Wenu stared, transfixed, as his heart began to beat wildly. Anning noticed his intense gaze and asked quietly, "What are you looking at?" "You," Wenu said, a sly grin on his face, his eyes glued to her. Anning figured his mind was in the gutter. After all, in her past life, he never bothered to hide his desires. Just then, Wenu grabbed her hand. While gently wiping her fingers with a napkin, he instructed her, "Don't lick your fingers in front of other people in the future. It's not a good look." Faced with this sudden concern, Anning was confused. Is he criticizing me for licking my fingers? On second thought, it wasn't very classy, but they had just met. How could he be so forward? Flustered, she quickly pulled her hand back. "I can do it myself." The Wenu of today seemed relatively gentle, but Anning had already seen his true colors in her past life. He would use any means necessary to get rid of any guy who tried to get close to her. The memory of his possessive and ruthless nature once filled her with disgust. But ironically, it was the same terrifying person who, after she died, was willing to kill for her and ruin his own life. Wenu was the first to break the silence. But all he got in return were Anning's distracted uh-huhs and ohs. Right now, Anning's mind was racing, trying to figure out how to change both of their destinies. She couldn't help but let out a heavy sigh, only to realize how quiet it had become. She looked up and met Wenyu's deep, bottomless eyes. Wenyu leaned in closer, his voice low. "What are you thinking about? I haven't said a word for 2 minutes." Before Anning could react, Wenyu sat back, crossed his arms, and said with a hint of coldness, "In those 2 minutes, you spaced out twice, said oh once, and then sighed." Anning quickly apologized for being rude. Wenyu didn't seem to blame her, but he did ask why she sighed. Anning made something up. "I'm just full and feeling sleepy." She tried to use it as an excuse to leave, but Wenyu stopped her. "I saw you after school yesterday. I called out to you. Why didn't you answer?" Anning paused, then answered instinctively, "I probably didn't hear you." Wenyu held his phone out to her. On the screen was a man with a bruised and swollen face. Anning froze. It was the groper from the bus. Before she could process it, Wenyu spoke with a proud look on his face. "I saw you chase after him yesterday, so I asked around and found out what happened. I went ahead and taught him a lesson for you. If you ever run into trouble like that again, don't be afraid. Just call me." His words hit her like a sledgehammer, and Anning's face turned pale. In her past life, he could push her enemy off a roof without hesitation. Now, he had badly beaten someone for her. If this continued, he would eventually destroy his own life. Anger flared up inside her. "What gives you the right to hit people?" she demanded. "Couldn't you just call the police? Are you above the law?" But Wenyu looked at her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "He groped you. He deserved it." Anning felt a wave of sadness. She knew she couldn't change Wenyu's mind. The man was proud and arrogant, always believing he was right. She got angry, Anning got angry, but Wenyu just grinned like a fool. Anning grabbed her bag and stormed out, ignoring Wenyu's anxious calls from behind her. The sharp honk of a horn cut through the air as a truck sped straight toward her. In the nick of time, Wenyu flew forward like a lightning bolt and pulled Anning back. Anning felt the world spin, and then she was in a warm, solid embrace. She could clearly feel the rapid rise and fall of Wenyu's chest. "Wenyu saved me," was the only thought in her blank mind. Before she could recover, Wenyu's anxious scolding began. "What's wrong with you? Are you crazy?" The yell made the still shaken Anning's face turn even paler. Wenyu realized he'd been too harsh, and softened his tone. "Why are you angry?" Anning stubbornly turned her head away, silent. Wenyu felt a headache coming on. He looked at the stubborn girl before him, feeling both helpless and sorry for her. He gently took her hand. "Let's cross the street first." They walked to the other side of the street in silence. Anning immediately pulled her hand away. Wenyu leaned in close and gently ruffled her hair. "Can you talk to me properly now?" Anning gathered her courage and said, "You shouldn't have hit him. It's wrong to solve problems with violence." Wenyu couldn't help but chuckle. He never would have thought that behind that pretty face was the heart of a grade schooler. Getting angry over such a trivial thing, he found it incredibly cute, and his affection for her grew even stronger. But Anning looked at him with a serious expression. "Do you get into fights often?" Wenyu answered with a straight face. "I'm an adult. I don't like to fight." Anning knew he was lying. He had already gotten into more than one fight just because of her. She didn't want him to repeat the mistakes of his past life. Having been through life and death, Anning understood that the connection between them was no longer something she could just sever. Her voice choked with emotion as she pleaded, "Can you promise me you won't get into fights anymore?" Wenyu felt a jolt in his heart as he watched the girl's tears well up. "What? I just hope that from now on, no matter what happens, you won't be so impulsive. Can you do that?" Faced with this sudden show of concern, Wenyu couldn't help but tease her. "We just met and you're already trying to manage me? Ji Anning, who do you think you are to me?" Ji Anning hated Wenyu's arrogant tone, but she had to convince him not to be so impulsive. As she was talking, her phone rang. It was the tutoring job she had found online before she was reborn. She had canceled it, so why were they calling? She hesitated for a moment before answering. The person on the other end immediately launched into a tirade, accusing her of being irresponsible and wasting their child's entire weekend. Anning sincerely apologized and insisted she couldn't make it, but the parent wouldn't accept an apology without a reason. Annoyed, Anning suggested they find a male tutor since it would just be her son and husband at home over the weekend. The implication was clear. Wenyu's face hardened as he listened, and he stared intently at Anning. "What's going on?" "It's nothing, let's go," Anning said, trying to slip away, but he grabbed her arm. Wenyu's tone had a frighteningly oppressive edge. "Did the man of the house make a move on you?" Anning looked away and denied it. "No." Wenyu frowned and blurted out, "You're a real trouble magnet, aren't you?" The words were out before he realized how hurtful they sounded. He was about to explain when Anning angrily shook his hand off. "Don't touch me!" She was hurt. She had never done anything to invite trouble, so what kind of person did he think she was? Seeing her reaction, Wenyu quickly held up his hands to explain. I didn't mean it like that. Of course it's not your fault. In situations like that, it's always the man's fault. I was just asking if that guy did something to you. If he did, I'll go teach him a lesson." Anning calmed down a little. "He didn't do anything. I was just being cautious." "Pretty smart of you," Wenyu said, affectionately patting Anning's head. He then looked at her with a smile in his eyes and declared, "Gee, Anning, be my girlfriend. You shouldn't have to work so hard. Money can solve all your current problems." Anning really wanted to punch this self-righteous guy. "No!" She refused flatly and turned to leave. Wenyu chased after her, grabbing her wrist. "Why?" Anning made up an excuse. "I don't have time for a boyfriend." Wenyu sneered. "You didn't understand what I meant. If you're my girlfriend, I'll give you an allowance and you won't have to work so hard." Anning's eyes widened in anger. She shot him a look. "And then what? I go from being a poor student to a gold digger?" But her serious question just made Wenyu laugh. "Ha ha ha, you're hilarious." Anning was speechless. Anning knew all too well how vicious rumors could be. She knew the damage that gossip had caused her in her past life. But Wenyu was unfazed. "You're overthinking it. A relationship is between two people. What does it have to do with anyone else?" Anning nodded. "That's true, but words can really kill a person." The sudden mention of death made Wenyu feel inexplicably uncomfortable, even though he wasn't superstitious. The next second, Wenyu leaned in and gently lifted her chin. "Don't worry about what other people say. If I hear anything, they'll regret it," Wenyu said, forcing the topic back. His gaze was intense as he stared at Anning. "So, be my girlfriend." He was fearless, but Anning couldn't be. She refused decisively. "No, the most I can be is your friend." But in Wenyu's eyes, when a pretty girl says she just wants to be friends, 9 times out of 10, she's keeping the guy as a backup option. The 10th is just hopelessly naive. Is G. Anning trying to keep me on the back burner, or is she just naive? Wenyu let out a soft laugh. "Then let's be friends for now." Anning breathed a sigh of relief. "Okay." When it was time for afternoon classes, Wenyu walked Anning to her classroom door. As soon as she entered, a frenemy type of girl came over. "Did you have lunch with Wenyu, the junior, today?" Anning didn't deny it. Wenyu was a big shot on campus, and the girl was curious how Anning knew him. 3,000 yen a night, is she worth it? The girl's words from her past life flashed in Anning's mind. Anning replied coolly, "We just know each other." She then looked up. "I have to do my homework now." The girl stood up and said sarcastically, "You really love to study, don't you?" She went back to her seat and complained to the people around her. "What's with her? What's she so arrogant about?" The other students exchanged glances, saying Anning was usually pretty normal and maybe she was just in a bad mood. The girl sneered. "Come on. Have you ever seen her talk to any of us? She wasn't so cold when she was having lunch with a rich kid. It's obvious she doesn't want to talk to us." The students immediately started gossiping. Anning studied quietly, but she could still hear them, even though they were trying to keep their voices down. It was just like her last life. The rumors were starting to spread. After school, Anning finished her dinner deliveries and jogged out of the school gates. The first thing she saw was Wenu. "Hey!" He greeted her with a roguish air. "Friend," Anning said, stopping. She hesitated for a moment. "What are you doing here?" Wenu said he wanted to drive her to work. Anning wanted to refuse, but Wenu was insistent. After all, persistence wears down resistance, and he didn't believe Anning could hold out forever. They soon arrived at the coffee shop. The car was parked on the side of the road, and Anning opened the door to get out. "You should head home. Traffic is going to get bad." Wenu suddenly grabbed Anning's wrist and asked if she had eaten dinner. "Our manager provides dinner," Anning said, trying to pull her hand away while warning him irritably, "Stop being so handsy." Wenu just grinned cheekily. Okay, friend. Anning heard the sarcasm in his voice and shot back. Good friends don't get handsy either. Wenu was unfazed and continued shamelessly. What time do you get off? I'll come pick you up. Anning refused flatly. Wenu insisted, using the don't be a stranger, we're friends excuse. Anning, trying to hold back her annoyance, said she had another part-time job that night. Wenu's expression changed. Another one? Where? Anning said it was at a bar on Chownan Road and that she could take the bus back to school so he shouldn't worry. But Wenu wouldn't let it go, frowning as he pressed. What kind of job is it? Anning replied calmly, sales. Wenu's gaze turned cold. You're going to sell alcohol at a bar? Anning calmly emphasized that she was just selling drinks, nothing more. Wenu turned away and was silent for a few seconds before looking back at her, his expression suddenly serious. He told her to reconsider being his girlfriend and said she didn't have to give him an answer right away. Anning thought about her past life, where she would never have had an honest conversation with Wenu, but this time she felt she should talk to him calmly. So Anning confessed to Wenu that her family was poor and she didn't have much, but being self-reliant was the most precious thing to her. After she finished, she turned and walked into the coffee shop. Wenu watched her go, then took out a cigarette and lit it, feeling an inexplicable frustration. Just then, his friends called to ask if he wanted to hang out over the weekend, and he agreed without a second thought. After hanging up, he glanced dismissively at Anning, who was diligently clearing tables and muttered with a sarcastic smile, "Idiot." Soon the coffee shop was closing. The manager, Shu Chen, stopped Anning as she was about to leave and awkwardly asked if she wanted to get a late-night snack with him. Anning politely declined, saying she had to go to Qiaonan Road. Shu Chen looked a little disappointed and asked casually, "Going out with friends?" Anning explained she was going to her part-time job. Shu Chen mentioned that he had already told his mom about the tutoring job for her. Anning genuinely thanked Shu Chen. Even though he would later be terrified of Wenu, he was a very gentle and considerate person. Meanwhile, Wenu was out drinking. Someone asked him what year he was in. Junior, Wenu replied coldly. Then someone else asked with a laugh if there were any pretty freshmen at their school. Anning's glare from earlier that day flashed in Wenu's mind, and the hand holding his glass paused involuntarily. The people there noticed something was up and immediately started teasing him. Looks like you've got someone in your sights. When are you going to bring her out for us to meet? Wenu took a sip of his drink and gave a provocative smile. I've said it before, I run this campus. Wenu felt a million miles away, his thoughts consumed by Ji Anning. What is she doing right now? Probably wearing a short beer promoter's skirt, working hard selling drinks. Just as he was thinking this, a beautiful woman tapped his shoulder. He impatiently pushed her away and took out his phone to send a text. Which place on Qiaonan Road? Anning replied instantly, NLA. Wenu smiled with satisfaction. NL had good security. The girl knew how to pick her spots. After a few more rounds, Wenu was starting to feel the alcohol. He let it slip that he was interested in a girl. His friend teased, with your high standards, she must be an angel to catch your eye. Wenu's eyes were hazy. Yeah, she's an angel. His friend was intrigued. So, have you won her over yet? Wenu shook his head. No, she's on financial aid and she's stubborn. She's afraid of getting involved with me. His friend laughed dismissively, another one playing hard to get. Wenu remembered the determined look in Anning's eyes when she said, I don't have much, but being self-reliant is the most precious thing to me. Maybe playing wasn't the right word for her. He smiled knowingly. Who knows, I'll let her stew for a bit. The next day at noon, a girl with red hair invited Anning to lunch. Anning waved her off and packed her bag, preparing to leave early. The green-haired girl saw this and said dismissively, Whatever. Don't you think she's arrogant? The red-haired girl quickly defended her. Not at all. She's really easygoing. The green-haired girl was hesitant. But she's pretty and doesn't talk to people. The red-haired girl explained, She doesn't have time. She has part-time jobs after school and has to take care of her grandmother. She's really busy. The green-haired girl laughed awkwardly. Maybe I was wrong. I was just repeating what I heard. It was true. A rumor starts with a whisper, but dispelling it takes a marathon. In the cafeteria, Anning was sweating as she worked. During a break, she tied her jacket around her waist, and her short-sleeved shirt outlined her nice figure, drawing the gazes of many of the guys. Who's that? Zhao Chen asked, squinting curiously. The person next to him glanced over. Isn't that the famous poor beauty? The one who brought her grandma to school at the start of the year? I heard she's running a food delivery business, but only for the girls' dorms. Everyone looked over curiously and saw Anning carrying a bag of food to another window. Her nose was dotted with sweat, and her cheeks were flushed. Zhao Chen was captivated. A beauty like that is doing this? I have to go meet her. Just then, Wen Yu walked into the cafeteria. Anning smiled and greeted him. But Wen Yu acted like he didn't see her and walked straight past. Anning's smile froze and she wondered, did he not see me? Why didn't he say hi? Wen Yu was secretly pleased. He wanted to give her stubborn personality the cold shoulder for a bit. Just then, a guy brushed past him and hurried toward Anning. Wen Yu was annoyed but didn't plan to intervene. Suddenly, Anning was bumped hard and lost her balance, about to fall. The only thing on her mind was that she couldn't drop the 2 meals in her hands, or she'd lose all her earnings for the afternoon. Just as Ji Anning was about to take a nosedive, someone caught her. Hey, beautiful, you okay? Hearing the sleazy voice, Anning turned to see Zhao Chen staring at her with a greasy look on his face. The painful memories of her past life flooded back in an instant. It was him. He was the one who drugged her and forced her to the rooftop. After she fell, her soul had wandered until Wen Yu avenged her. Now, fear washed over her like a tidal wave. She was like a frightened deer, yanking herself away from Zhao Chen's grasp. In her panic, Anning looked through the bustling crowd and sent a pleading look toward Wen Yu. Wen Yu, who had planned to ignore her, felt a sharp pang in his heart. Without thinking, he strode forward, grabbed Anning's slender arm, and pulled her behind him. He took the bags from her hands and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" Anning took a deep breath, the color slowly returning to her face. "I'm fine," she said softly. "I was just startled." Wen Yu's gaze turned cold as he looked at Zhao Chen. "What happened? Who are you?" A flash of annoyance crossed Zhao Chen's face, but he quickly put on a big smile. "Hey, Wen Yu, it's me, Zhao Chen. My family owns Shengteng Pharmaceuticals." Wen Yu's eyes darted between them. "Do you two know each other?" Anning paused for a moment before answering coolly. "No." Zhao Chen quickly apologized. "I'm so sorry. Did you twist anything? Should I take you to the hospital?" "No need," Anning refused bluntly. Zhao Chen didn't give up. "Then let me get your number so you can contact me if anything's wrong." "Not necessary." Wen Yu could see Anning's disgust for Zhao Chen. Compared to how she had rejected him, this was on another level, and he felt a strange sense of satisfaction. He no longer wanted to give her the cold shoulder. Seeing Zhao Chen still pestering her, Wen Yu cut him off impatiently. "She's fine. You can go." With that, he wrapped his arm around Anning's shoulders, staking his claim. "She doesn't need your help. Go eat your food." Defeated, Zhao Chen could only walk away sullenly. Wen Yu looked down at her and teased, "I didn't know you were such a scaredy cat. You went pale just from a little bump." Anning forced a smile. The desperation of her past life was etched into her memory. The shadow of it wouldn't disappear overnight. She looked down to hide her emotions and said softly, "Give me my stuff, you should go eat." Wen Yu watched her back disappear into the crowd, feeling puzzled. She had said she didn't know Zhao Chen, so why did she have such a strong reaction? The thought of Zhao Chen made Anning's blood boil. The crazy idea of castrating him even crossed her mind. But what would happen if she actually did it? In her past life, Wen Yu had already provided the answer. His life was completely ruined. As she was lost in thought, a pair of shoes appeared in front of her. Anning looked up sharply and saw Wen Yu, his hands in his pockets, asking with concern, "What are you doing sitting there?" He then smoothly sat down next to her. Anning looked at Wen Yu and felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. "Why didn't you go eat?" Wen Yu was a little flattered. It was the first time Anning had spoken to him so gently. He paused for a moment before speaking. "That guy, Zhao Chen, have you had any run-ins with him before?" Anning denied it flatly, but she was curious why he was asking. Wen Yu's expression turned serious. "He was supposed to be a junior like me, but he got into trouble for attempted rape his sophomore year and had to take a year off. That's why he's still a sophomore." Anning understood immediately. "Don't worry, I'll stay away from him. Besides," she added, "I have this." She pulled out a small spray bottle. Wen Yu took it and squinted at it in the sunlight. "What is this?" Anning smiled. "Homemade pepper spray." Wen Yu couldn't help but laugh. "You're one of a kind." In the sunlight, Wen Yu looked dazzlingly handsome, and Anning found herself staring. After a moment, she forced herself to suppress the fluttering in her heart and look away. At my part-time job at NL, I only drink water I bring myself, and I have a special mark on my cup. If anyone touches it, I'll know immediately. Hearing this, Wenu felt a surge of sympathy. What must a young girl go through to have to be so cautious? He handed the spray bottle back, deliberately letting his fingers linger in her palm for a full 3 seconds. Anning looked at his roguish behavior, sighed in resignation, stuffed the pepper spray back in her bag, and stood up to leave. "Let's have lunch together," Wenu called after her. "By yourself," Anning retorted without missing a beat, quickening her pace. Wenu trotted after her. As they passed the club recruitment booths, his green-haired friend was shouting, "Hey, come check out the fighting club. We've got professional equipment, reliable coaches, and great benefits. If you're a real man, come learn MMA. None of that flashy taekwondo stuff or traditional martial arts routines. The only real combat is MMA." 2 girls from the taekwondo booth overheard and got angry. "Promote your own club. Why do you have to put others down?" My bad, don't be mad, ladies," the green-haired guy said with a grin, then turned back and started shouting again. "If you want a real adrenaline rush, it's MMA or nothing." Just then, he recognized Ji Anning at the fighting club's booth. Anning also thought the guy looked familiar but couldn't place him. She asked, "Excuse me, does the fighting club accept female members?" The green-haired guy was about to say no, when he saw Wenu behind Anning, giving him an okay sign. Following Wenyu's signal, the green-haired guy signed Anning up for the fighting club. When Anning asked about the training schedule, he said advanced members trained at least 3 times a week and regular members twice. He then glanced at Wenu and made an exception for Anning, making her a probationary member who only had to come once a week. "I will be the guardian of my bro's love life." Suddenly, Anning's phone rang. After answering, she hurried off campus. Curious, Wenu followed her, only to see her run toward a clean-cut young man. Wenyu's face instantly darkened. Who is he? He trailed them, watching them laugh and talk. Anning was especially radiant, smiling more brightly than he'd ever seen her smile at him. Wenu felt a sour taste in his mouth. Later, Shuchen and Anning arrived at a northeastern-style restaurant. They had just sat down when Wenu sauntered over with his hands in his pockets. "Hey, what a coincidence. Mind if I join? I haven't eaten yet." Shuchen was speechless. He forced himself to ask Anning, "Who is he?" Anning sighed internally, having forgotten about Wenyu's thick-skinned nature. In her past life, he was the reason she got a reputation as a gold digger. She smiled politely but awkwardly and made the introductions. "This is my upperclassman, Wenu. This is the manager of the coffee shop where I work, Shuchen." So he's the little boss from her job, Wenu thought, frowning slightly. Anning's heart tightened. She knew Wenu was possessive, and in her past life, no guy who got close to her had a happy ending. So she quickly added, "Shuchen helped me find a tutoring job. I felt bad for troubling him, so I wanted to treat him to a meal." The way she said him made both Wenu and Shuchen understand that Anning subconsciously considered Wenu one of her own. Wenyu's lips curved into a smile. He extended a hand to Shuchen. "Thanks for looking after my junior." Shuchen could clearly feel the hostility from Wenu, but he still shook his hand like a gentleman. "You're welcome." The moment their hands clasped, they began a silent power struggle. Only then did Anning realize that what she had just said made it sound like she and Wenu were the ones who were a couple. She quickly tugged on Wenyu's arm. "Let's order." Wenu let go of Shuchen's hand with a fake smile. The guest should order first. Not wanting to lose face in front of the girl he liked, Shuchen endured the pain in his hand. "I'm not picky. Anning, you decide." Anning picked up the menu and immediately had a problem. She usually only ate vegetarian dishes at the cafeteria, and she couldn't make Shuchen eat that. Just as she was thinking, Wenu snatched the menu. "Let me." He then started ordering on his own. Just from the names of the dishes, Anning knew it was way over her budget. She sighed inwardly. "Wenu is probably my curse in both lifetimes." Anning stared at the table full of leftovers, feeling no joy at all. With Wenu around, the meal had been a complete mess. Wenu called the waiter over to pay, pulling out a black card. "I'm treating," Anning said in a panic. But Wenu just smiled, his tone intimate. "Don't be a stranger." Watching their seemingly close interaction, Shuchen finally understood. He realized he no longer had a chance. After leaving the restaurant, Anning rushed to apologize to Shuchen on Wenyu's behalf. Shuchen waved his hands awkwardly. No, it's fine. Your boyfriend is an interesting guy. Anning was completely confused as to why he would get that impression and quickly explained it was a misunderstanding. But Shuchen thought she was just being shy and simply smiled as he opened his car door. On second thought, Anning realized that this way, Wenyu had nipped Shuchen's pursuit in the bud before it could even begin, like in her last life, which wasn't a bad thing. With that, she gave up trying to explain and let him misunderstand. Just then, Anning felt an intense gaze on her back. She turned to see Wenyu staring at her with a serious expression. "Now let's talk," he said, leaning in close to her. "Is he pursuing you?" Anning looked up at Wenyu, a hint of suppressed anger in her eyes. She coldly tossed out, "None of your business," and tried to walk past him. Wenyu sneered. "What do you mean, none of my business? Didn't you say we were friends?" Hearing this, Anning stopped and said seriously, "Wenyu, I'm being sincere when I say I want to be friends. But if you think it's boring or meaningless, then we don't have to be." Wenyu was taken aback at first, then he started to laugh to himself. Anning sighed, thinking it was useless to be serious with him. To her surprise, Wenyu suddenly reached out and grabbed her wrist. Anning instinctively struggled. "Let go!" she yelled. Wenyu was unfazed, his expression blunt. "Gee, Anning, let me be clear. Who the hell wants to be just friends with you? There's no such thing as a real friendship between a guy and a girl. It's just an excuse to get close to you and wait for an opportunity. So, I'll be straight with you. I want to be your boyfriend, and I want to do the things boyfriends and girlfriends do." Wenyu had deliberately said this to see Anning, who was always so calm, blush with anger. But to his surprise, there was no anger on her face at all. Instead, she looked at him with something that looked a lot like pity. Anning had shot Wenyu a look. "Let go of my greasy hand. Don't cause a scene at the school gate." For some reason, Wenyu let go, but he regretted it the second he did, cursing himself for missing his chance. Unwilling to give up, he pressed, "So what's your answer?" Anning was silent for a moment, then looked him straight in the eye. "What is it you like about me anyway?" "I like that you're good-looking," Wenyu said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Can't very well say I fell in love with your noble soul, can I?" Hearing this, Anning felt a strange sense of relief. Wenyu was confused, thinking he must have imagined it. After being reborn, Jianing had been carrying the heavy emotional debt of Wenyu's deep love from her past life, and she hadn't dared to see him for days. Now, learning that his affection was so simple, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Anning couldn't help but laugh. "Wenyu, you're such a scoundrel." Wenyu's heart skipped a beat, worried she had read his mind. Anning smiled brightly. "Even after being reborn, I still just want to be friends with you. If you're not okay with that, then we don't have to be." Wenyu was about to argue when someone called Anning's name. They both turned to see Anning's red-haired classmate walking in from off-campus with a few other students. Anning took the opportunity to say goodbye to Wenyu and hurried over to them. Sun Xianya's eyes lit up. "How do you know Wenyu?" she asked immediately. Anning answered casually, "We met in the school cafeteria." The girls were stunned for a moment, then got excited. "Wow, is he trying to pursue you?" Anning admitted it freely. "He is interested." The red-haired girl and the others were even more intrigued. And then, but Anning's next words, "We're not right for each other," crushed their hopes for a juicy story. Anning went on to explain, "Our family backgrounds are too different, and besides, I don't have time to date." The girls were taken aback. They felt that even though Anning was the same age as them, she seemed much more mature. But Sun Sanya just sneered. "You're ridiculous. If you were his girlfriend, why would you need to work? What you make in a month isn't even enough for his gas money." Anning heard this and replied calmly, "Are you talking about dating or being a sugar baby?" Sun Sanya's face fell. "When a guy and a girl are dating, isn't it normal for the guy to pay for things? Or at least he pays the bigger share and you pay the smaller one." Anning nodded. "You're not wrong. If that's what you want, it's fine as long as both people are happy." Her tone shifted. "But like I said, the money I earn is for my and my grandmother's living expenses and medical bills. That's not dating money. Were you suggesting a guy should pay to support your family? Because that wouldn't be dating, would it?"